All right.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soul Creativity. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday, which is a little bit of a different day. And I'm very pleased to welcome as our guest today, Marianne Skiba. And Marianne is a creatrix. She is always following her creative nudges, which is something we want to talk about today. In addition, she is a makeup artist and has worked on both movies and TV, and she'll talk a little bit about that. But we're really interested in how creativity works towards transformation and how, when we follow that, it leads us to where we want to be. And I also want to remind everyone to look below the video. There are my email addresses there and my website and some other information. And please like and subscribe. And we do have the live stream up. So if you have a comment or question for Marianne, please feel free to share it with us. And we will get to those as we talk. So welcome, Marianne, and thank you for joining us. We're so pleased to have you.
Naven, thank you so much for having me as a guest. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. And I want to start, Marianne, by talking, because we had been talking about this recently when we had a conversation about honoring and following that creative nudge within. And I know you recently have been exploring that creative avenue. And so I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about just how important it is for us to learn to recognize when we're getting that creative nudge and then honor and follow where it leads.
Yes, that is very good. Learning to recognize that creative nudge that part hasn't been difficult for me in my life. It seems as though I'm always open to whatever the next thing might be. Some of that may be because of being a freelance artist. As a makeup artist, we are, by and large, it's a freelance lifestyle. So you're always waiting for the next thing, the next job, the next lead, the next contact, what have you. But so I think I'm poised for it. So maybe that's the first step, is to be open to that nudge, to be able to listen for it. And sometimes these nudges come to me. Sometimes I'll hear it in my head. And other times it's just a feeling I start to get. And sometimes it starts with a restlessness. I don't want to say necessarily a feeling of discontent, but definitely a feeling of some impending change. And I've learned to try not to resist it, to follow it where it leads. And sometimes that gets me in trouble. It has taken me through some turbulent times, but I believe that looking back, had I not listened to or acted on that feeling, that nudge from the universe, that I wouldn't be in the places that I am now. Now, sometimes those places are fabulous and sometimes they are not so fabulous, but I feel it's all part of my growth. It's all part of, my creative growth, my spiritual growth.
Yeah, it just makes me think that, that's the path we're meant to follow. If we don't say yes to the creative nudges when they come, then the universe isn't going to keep sending them. So, what you said is important. It's we have to learn to say yes. We have to honor that. And also, I think we get good at, do they resonate with us or not? Obviously, the universe isn't going to direct us into something that's harmful to ourselves or anyone else. But some of it, like you said, is not always necessarily the easy road. And when you look back, you can usually see what that was about. But it's not always easy when we're going through a period of transformation. I also think it's important when we honor those creative nudges. And like you said, you're lucky that you've been able to tap into them. You're kind of in tune. but there are practices people can do to, just doing inner practices, whatever works for anyone, whether it's
Yes.
meditation or, walking in nature, drumming, dancing,
Mm.
whatever it is, doing
Mhm.
art. It connects you with that inner spot
Yeah.
that is actually your guide. But I think by following those nudges, that's a word I would use. They're our guides, and they keep
Yes.
us authentic. And that goes back to that path that we're supposed to be on. And it's not always easy. Sometimes maybe it is. But I do think that, it keeps us in our authenticity and in our truth. And I wondered if you had anything to add to that, if that's how you feel.
It is largely. Um, I'm thinking about finding ways to tune in and open up to those things. And I think finding your place where you can be in a good position or a good place to kind of receive those things is very important. I'm not personally really good with meditation. I want to be, I try to be, but I have difficulty connecting that way. So I find my own forms of meditation. And, for me, nature is key. I grew up in the inner city as a child. When I was 10 years old, we moved out to the country, way out to the country. And it was as if my soul was released. I spent so much time playing in the woods, all summer long. My brothers and I, we would graze. We would graze like animals all summer long, because there was just abundance everywhere where we were. There were so many fruit trees, berries, and each thing has its season, and we learned about them. I learned so much about that. And I remember my big brother got a Yule Gibbons book. I don't know if viewers remember Yule Gibbons. He was a naturalist, and he would find all these things that are edible in the forest. And we thought, and now as an adult, I feel, well, I'm never going to starve because I know how and where to eat. But the important thing about that is, the natural, good, untarnished nutrients that we were getting were giving us much more than we bargained for. But it was also spending that time. I mean, I didn't wear shoes all summer long, and I ran around barefoot in the woods. And just that, now, of course, they call that earthing.
Right.
Taking off your shoes and standing on the ground and just letting that, pull up that energy. Now it's called earthing. And a good friend of mine was recently talking to me about forest bathing. Yes. I'm kind of like, what's forest bathing? Like, so tell me about that. Tell me about that forest bathing. And he's like, yeah, he goes out. He likes to go to Shenley Park in Pittsburgh, and just kind of sit and be. And I said, oh, you mean a walk in the woods? So forest bathing. Okay, so now we have earthing and forest bathing. But for me, as a young person, it was just being, so you have to find a place to just be. And maybe that's a form of meditation. That's not my field of expertise, but I know that that's where I connect. And when I lived in New York for many, many years, I used to just pine and just long for things green, and I would have to go take little day trips out to find greenery. So for me, that's my catalyst, I think. And when I spend enough time doing that,
I can understand that.
Yeah, I get the messages, and I listen to them, right, wrong, or otherwise. But that has landed me where I am now, and I've always envisioned myself as that leaf or twig in a stream. Little leaf or twig falls from the tree into the stream, and it just goes where the water carries it. And sometimes it gets hung up at the in the bank or somewhere for a little while, but then with the next high water, it moves on. that's kind of been me in my life. And I've been very fortunate in the places that it's landed me for the most part.
Mhm.
But I go with it. I like to think I'm a free spirit of sorts. I know when I'm, you know, held down too long, I get, and one of my favorite words, I get utsy, you know, and I start to listen. And I
Mhm.
listen not just, with my head and my ears. I really need to listen with my heart.
Right.
And I ask myself, the one meditation that I do is just, taking like, 2 or 3 intentional breaths and just asking, what do I know in my heart?
Mhm.
And just listening for a response. And sometimes I get nothing, and sometimes I get something, and it can be really quite profound.
Right. I
And
think what you were talking about meditation is important because I think some people get hung up on that if you think of the traditional way and it doesn't really work for you.
yeah,
And, it's important not to overlook. I feel like walking in nature, is one of the deepest ways to meditate. At least it
hmm
is for me. Or drumming. I like to sit in
yeah,
drumming. Things like that you wouldn't maybe necessarily think of. And so I think it's important for people. Sometimes I hear people say, well, I don't get any messages.
yeah.
And
That
we can feel that way, but it's really just a matter, I think, of shutting ourselves out from that. Um, I really liked your image of being the twig or the leaf in the stream because that's just such an accurate way to look at it. And it also shows me that you're not putting up a resistance to the flow. And
yeah,
that's really important because it's not always going to be a high all the time. You're going to go, life is ups and downs. And so you just have to kind of not resist that, um, and listen for that inner voice. But I did want to talk to you about creativity, being in that place of creativity and transformation, whether it's personal or on a
Mhm.
business level. If you're an entrepreneur, then that's
Mhm.
personal as well. So I'm wondering what thoughts you have about how that plays into personal transformation.
Well, that's a really good question, and that's a whole topic in itself, isn't it?
Mhm.
But I will say, from just my personal experience, creativity and transformation, they don't always complement one another. And I have found, though, that, and I say that only because sometimes when we're creative and we're in a really good creative space or something, we're a little bit resistant to changing that.
Mhm.
Or but um it can disrupt us creative types.
Mhm.
Transitions can be very disruptive. And I've always been open to them, as I said prior. But I will say that as I'm getting older, maybe I'm not as open to some of the changes as I used to be. And I find myself longing for some things to stay the same,
Mhm.
the familiar, because I've lived a life of such change.
Mhm.
But, my curiosity will always get the better of me to see what's next around the corner. And trying to be creative through this is really difficult. Um, I'm going through a transition right now. I'm still, an active makeup artist. My career in movies and television is still a priority. I did have another business for the last 12 years. I had an organic day spa and boutique, and I just closed it because I got that nudge that it was time. And it was not, the funny thing, it wasn't easy until it was. Do you know what I mean? What wasn't easy was just the preparation and everything to that transition, and trying to keep my creative self alive through it, because there is always stress involved with transitions. And that can really, tamp down your creativity. But, we draw on that, though, to say, okay, how can I do this in a graceful, creative way? And then how to transition into what else I want to do when I'm not 100% sure what that is yet. And I think that's maybe part of the problem with transitions, is when you're not sure what's going to be next, but you just know that this isn't it, or it served me for a time, but now that time is past. But it's a little scary because I don't know what's next. And that's where your creativity comes in, and your imagination too, which is, your creative force.
And you want to maintain that state of creativity. There might be valleys and peaks to it, but you want to maintain that when you're going through a transition, because you need to stay tapped in. It does keep you curious,
right?
And the imagination, you can really activate your imagination through that. I wanted to, say something too. When you're talking about closing a business, you also have that stress, or at least that element that you were serving other people in that particular business. So you're not only dealing with your own, transition, but you have, other people play into that too. And so, I think sometimes it can be hard to stay on your own path. And that goes back to that authenticity and your own truth, that when it's time for you to follow another path or branch off or do something different. And it's so easy for us to just maintain the status quo or what's familiar to us, because we don't want to either upset ourselves, that fear comes in, or we don't want to upset other people that, have gotten used to us being a particular way, or providing, particular service, or. So I think that's interesting. And it brings me back to that authenticity part of, ourselves, honoring our soul. And so I think it's really brave that you're able to do that, that, you're in touch and you're able to take the steps that you want to.
Wow. Naven, that is an excellent point, though, is how do you stay true to yourself and your, your nudges and your heart and your soul? How do you stay true to that when there are others depending on you, and your changes and transitions and how you handle them affects other people? And, how can you do that in a way that's true to yourself without being selfish? And sometimes that's in perception, but that's a really delicate thing sometimes. And I think if you understand what your passion is and you're able to express it, and you do that in advance, or or as you're beginning to go through something, it definitely it makes it easier for all around you, because in traveling, my travels down my stream of life, sometimes you don't want to create a big wake that's going to disrupt others. Sometimes it can't be helped in life, but I don't like to do that. I don't do things on a whim. If I get this nudge, I really spend time to think it through and feel it through, more or less, because sometimes my brain just will shut down. And that's when I'm begun to learn to listen to my heart a bit. And I will mention one thing that I have started to listen to, and I'll give a shout out to a woman, Megan Watterson. And she is the one that talks about, she's where I learned the technique of taking the intentional breaths and asking, what do I know in my heart? she had some really fantastic things like that. And that's been helpful to me, because as I'm doing that and feeling my way through decisions, I'm trying to also think, how is this going to affect the people around me, the people I love? When I closed my shop, I had employees to think about, and my customers who have been with me since day one and who were very upset. And, I try to set it up so that it is going to be not a bad thing for them, for them all, you talk about not burning bridges and such, but I don't want to break trusts,
Right.
Because I'm pursuing my own goals. I don't pursue my own callings single-mindedly, because we do live in a world where we have people around us, people that love us and depend on us and who support us if we're lucky enough.
Right.
And so, sometimes these creative callings that we get take us in some strange places if we're willing to go. But you really do want to weigh that against what you already have, what commitments you've made in life, and take that all in, because there's a place for all of it. It's
exactly.
just sometimes finding that sweet spot.
Well, I think that brings us back to, that all is one and we're all interconnected. And so, it is like the butterfly effect.
Yes.
We don't operate in a completely separate, realm. That what we do influences or impacts others. However, I do think if you don't follow your own truth and creativity, then you're not good to, you know what I mean? You can't get to a point where you're not living your truth. Yeah. And so I think the way you were talking about it, you take these nudges and you internalize, you listen to that voice within, and that's your guide, really. It will let you know if that's the path for you. And after you do it a few times, the people that support you and live with you, they'll know that's your pattern, and they start to trust, the traditional way is to know the end game. And that's the way we're taught, like you should know where this is leading, but you don't with creativity all the time. And that's really not the way everything is meant to be. And so some of the greatest treasures that we find are the ones that we don't know where we're going yet. We just know that we are meant to take that path. And so I think that's really exciting, but it does take us into needing to trust what's coming up. There was something else I wanted to ask you about, because you're sitting there with your Emmy Awards behind you. And it makes me think about, makeup artist makes me think about transformation as well. And when you're working in your field, you're transforming people into a character. And I work with story a lot for transformation. And so I know as a fiction writer, if you change one little thing in a story, you change the story. And that's why it's important. Your work is important to a particular show and to that character, because it makes them take on that different energy that they have to portray. And I was wondering how you think about that, as you're working on somebody, and obviously you've been in it long enough to, the importance of, bringing that character to life, and how that has to match, the story at that particular time.
And yes, that it's an interesting process, though, because it's not just my creative vision. When you're working on a movie or a television or what have you, and there's a character, we all read the scripts and we all have our own interpretations of what that character might look like. But that's why we have meetings about it. The director always has the final say. It's their vision, really. The producers, creators of the show or what have you will have theirs. usually it all comes down to the director's call. Sometimes you're on the same page, the same wavelength, and that's great. Sometimes not so much, but you work it out. So you do often have to learn to be creative within constraints. It's not just I get creative license. Sometimes I do, and that's wonderful. Other times the actor themselves has some input, and that sometimes you're on the same page with them, sometimes you're not. Sometimes I found that when they just trust is key, but so there's a lot of creative influences with it all, but it's being part of that team that can really be wonderful, because yes, you do have certain constraints. I'm not the only one involved in the process, in this visual construction. There is the costume designers, there the hairstylists, and myself, and creating a character and having that character put together and come to life. Then you have the actor is the one actually bringing it to life on the screen. And so there's a lot of components that build this thing. And then there is the director's direction of it. So it's really great, because if you do have a great supportive team that works really cohesively, really well together, really wonderful things happen. And it's not always that way, and when it's not, then you learn to be creative where you can, and so that you're not stifled, because that happens a lot too. I did one show quite some time ago, but I never forgot it. It was really difficult. And there really wasn't any creativity. Everything was just kind of stagnant, not just for me as a makeup artist, but in a lot of departments. And I was very unhappy, because I wasn't doing anything creative. And I remember just sitting there. I was sitting on the set of this show, and I was just kind of feeling miserable. And it was like an office set. And there was a little plant on the office set. And I had lots of time to kill. So I'm sitting there, and on the back of my little script, I pulled a pencil out of the thing, and I started to sketch this plant that was on the desk. And it was a real plant, which, was kind of fun, because there's often fake things. And I started drawing this plant. And as a makeup artist, some people are surprised, but I can't draw. I can't draw a stick man. But for some reason, I was able to just tune into some kind of a creative wellspring, inside. And I drew this beautiful plant in pencil on the back page of my script. And I wish I brought it. I still have it, because it made me in that moment so happy and so fulfilled. And it told me, I felt like it was just the universe, just spirit telling me that you are a creative soul. You're just not in a creative place right now, but this too shall pass. And it did. And I still have that little picture. And every now and then I have to look at it and tell myself, it's there. It's there. I think we all have it.
Yeah. Everybody has creativity. It depends on how much you trust it, how you tap into it. But, we're born creatives. Listening to you talk, I'm thinking about how creative collaborations are just wonderful when they work. And you have all that creative energy flowing and working together with another creative. It's one of the things that I know I love to do when I have the opportunity. And I'm sure you experienced it when it's in flow and everybody's working at like peak creativity and everyone is enjoying that. What you create together is so, it's really magical. And I think it's so rewarding. And before we go, I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about the Emmys that are behind you, because as someone that's not in that field, but, I love storytelling. So I love, movies, documentaries, script writing, TV shows. So wondering if you want to just tell us a little bit about receiving those.
Well, as they say, it's an honor just to be nominated, but it does feel really great to win. I have been very fortunate, but these guys back here are a result of a team effort.
Mm-hmm.
Teams that, I led. I had a vision. I had an opportunity to pull in some really wonderful creative personalities to assist. Writers of the show were involved because in order to win a makeup Emmy, you have to have something that has some zing to it. You know, you have to have a good script. And so when the writers are involved in such, and you get something that you can sink your teeth into, then you assemble a really great team. And sometimes it just all comes together, and you receive an honor. And the reason the Emmys are so important to me is because these are you are judged by your peers. So these, the Emmys are voted on by others within the industry. And other makeup artists, hairstylists, all the different departments are looking at your work, judging your work. And when they find it to be outstanding, it really means a lot. And the Emmy competition can be very fierce.
Oh, I could imagine.
There's a lot of people vying for the same thing. And it just is such a good feeling. I know both times for my Emmys, and I've been fortunate enough to win, several other awards and such. And, I must confess, I do enjoy external gratification. I do seem to like awards, and I've been fortunate in that area, but it's not, it's not all about that. Or what have you, but it is just a good feeling to know that your peers have judged you and found your work outstanding. And, it means a lot. It really does.
It sounds like at the time that that happened, you really were in a good state of creative flow with other people.
I was fortunate. That was an
important part of it.
For the most part, yeah. No, there were things to overcome, of course. But I always say, in those instances, the good guys won. It's fierce competition, as I said. There's a lot of, a lot of things going down, but I always feel like the good rises.
To kind of note that you're actually busy in that field today.
Oh yes.
Even like living in Pittsburgh, that you never seem to be lacking for work. There's a lot of activity going on, so that's really exciting.
Thank goodness there's a lot of work in Pittsburgh right now, and that's really, we owe that to the fact that the state of Pennsylvania is offering a tax credit for film companies to come in here. And as long as that stays alive, the work in Pittsburgh will stay alive. I love being able to work here. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I lived in New York for many, many years, and I'm happy to be back in Pittsburgh because, it is my hometown. And, they say, if you're from Pittsburgh, sooner or later you come back. And I'm beginning to believe that's true because I see it all the time. I like being able to work here. I still do want to travel some. I love traveling for work, but I'm glad I haven't had to do it for a long time, for quite some time. And with the way things are right now, I'm glad I'm not traveling. I'm glad I'm at home working from my hometown.
That's a very fortunate.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool about Pittsburgh as well, that there's such a really good, a strong film industry and production. I'm so glad you took the time to talk to us today, Marianne, because I really wanted to talk about that creative nudge and following it, because I knew you're going through it and I'm going through it right now. And I think a lot of people are. And so I think it's important that we kind of talk about it and support each other through that. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. And if anyone we don't have any comments now, but sometimes I receive them after the fact. So if anyone comments later, I'll certainly pass that along to you as well so you can respond. And I want to
Okay.
thank everyone who did join us and wish you a wonderful weekend, Marianne, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.